Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. So as you can tell based on the title, well, we are going to be talking today about Gucci and by extension Kering. They recently released their final year results. We'll be talking about some responses to that, as well as Gucci overall is feeling the pressure. So we'll talk about that annual report, the earnings call, as well as what the investor analysts have been saying and reacting to the situation at Gucci, because I think it's very interesting to hear all these different perspectives, as well as we're going to talk about the handbags, because there was a lot of talk around the handbags because this is Gucci, right? Just as an overall, Kering as a group was down 12% in 2024. Their recurring operating income, the amount of revenue the company is left with when you minus their day-to-day expenses, their business operations, that was actually down by 46%. Sales from their directly operating stores, they went down by 13%. Wholesale revenue was down by 22%. They wanted to do that to heighten their exclusivity. So they've been making these moves to elevate their brands and make them more exclusive. Aesthetically, they've also gone in that direction, but overall Kering has been on the decline. And Gucci also in 2024, their revenue was down by 23%, down to 7.7 billion. Keep in mind, Gucci as a brand was hovering around the 10 billion mark. So while there have been some drastic moves from Gucci, we're not seeing the results here, at least right now. And of course, we've talked about how Sabato de Sarno was recently just let go. We talked about that in a video. We talked about some of the major reasons why, the overall luxury industry slump, the reliance on those online retailers like Matches Fashion, Farfetch, and this transition that they're currently in to be more exclusive with their retail offering. Of course, the drastic aesthetic change, as well as a lot of their customer base felt very unclear as to what was the direction. Was it minimal? Was it heritage? Was it trying to be sexy Tom Ford? Was it going boho? As well as, of course, the price increases. Was the quality worth the price that Gucci was proposing in 2024? So I did a whole breakdown on that, but there were also some interesting points brought up during the annual earnings call. This is Kering's presentation as to what happened the last year, what they did. Overall, Gucci for the last 18 months, what they had stated during that call was, with the Sabato era, they had two key focuses. Prior to that, they had mentioned that during the Alessandro years, there was this buildup of the aspirational side, is what they were saying, as well as the fashion side, what we had saw during the Alessandro years. Of course, there was that interim period with the design team, but the past 18 months during the Sabato era, they wanted to focus on, one, the heritage of the brand, and two, the elevation of the brand. And of course, with the elevation, we saw the increase in prices. Part of me did wonder, why didn't they use that interim period with the design team? Perhaps they need to figure out the strategy, and there was also, I think, pressure on them to have a creative director installed. But during the presentation, what they did do was they went through the various handbags and icons that they had revamped during the past 18 months. They had mentioned the Blondie, so this is a reissue of a bag from 1971 named after Blondie. Of course, Debbie Harry was used in the imagery, the campaign images. I think it makes sense to want to make an icon out of the style. She is a very iconic musician, source of inspiration. I just wonder if perhaps the campaign around this bag, the way the marketing was done, could have been more impactful. I always think of Debbie Harry as glam meets rock and roll. I don't know if we saw that. Next, they talked about the Jackie, and of course they did actually play quite heavily into that very early on. This was what we first saw on the runway. What Sabato had stated he wanted to do was bring back this sort of casual grandeur that Jackie Kennedy Onassis embodied with her style. She was a source of inspiration reference even in the last collection, or the last runway collection, as well as the last pre-fall 2025 collection. There were some styling cues that were taken from Jackie. You did see how they did try to reference her as an icon. During this period, they also really focused on the bamboo. I actually really like this style. I think it's one of their strongest iterations. And of course, it leans into the heritage with the bamboo handle. During the wartime, there was like a scarcity of material, so using the bamboo as a handle was, well, it was like very resourceful during the time. I actually think it looks quite cool, and I think it still hits today. Now, some of the most recent campaign images around this bag, we are seeing the bamboo as well as like the bamboo diva. We're seeing like east-west proportions that have metal and resin handles. In these finishes, it feels a little bit more contemporary. Now, another style that they had also mentioned was the bee bag. So this was actually originally a men's bag. Personally, I didn't actually know any of this. It was from the 1950s. It was famously worn by Samuel Beckett. And I will say the fact that I learned more about this bag from the earnings call versus what I saw communicated through the runway or like the influencers wearing and promoting these products, it just feels like the message isn't getting there. I had also mentioned what they wanted to do with this bag was they wanted to elevate this bag, make this one of their higher price styles. I'm not gonna lie, when I saw this bag and it was $4,400 for this like raw natural canvas version, I was a little bit like, whoa. They did state during this call that they have been using higher quality leather. Personally, I would love to know more about this. Could they talk a little bit more, or could this be expressed in like the advertising or the influence they're using? If they really have up to the quality of their products and craftsmanship of their products, that messaging is just not getting out to the customer. If there is like an enhanced quality and craftsmanship behind these products, the customers need to know what has changed and why the prices have been up. I don't know if like a lot of customers feel convinced by these recent price increase moves. Now, they did also mention how they have the emblem line. So these are the canvas bags. So these are supposed to be their more accessibly priced handbags, going back to the heritage. They're also releasing it in new colors and like different kinds of like trims, the brown trim, the black trim, as well as softer pastel colors. In that way, that makes sense. Now, during the earnings call, I did think it was interesting how it was brought up during the Q&A, how there has been less of an emphasis and focus on their best sellers, which we all know has been the Marmont as well as the Dionysus. Yet I felt like every time I went on the Gucci website, at least over the past year, I would see like a lot of the Marmont quite heavily featured just in new revamped iterations, maybe new pockets, maybe new silhouettes with like a top handle or something. But they have been using the Marmont line. But I think the message we're getting here is they don't want to focus on it as much. Of course, I think we are still seeing it though in seasonal variations as well as the Dionysus, not as much. But of course, these are the bags that got Gucci to $10 billion, if we're being so real. What is glaring to me is when I look at a lot of these main line bags that were highlighted, they are all heritage bags. Reference the heritage, which of course Gucci is a legacy heritage brand, but it doesn't feel like there is like a hot style for 2025. Maybe the most contemporary bag I would say is probably the bamboo top handle, like the Diva version that is a little bit more east-west. That feels quite contemporary in terms of new styles, new silhouettes. I don't really think Sabato had his stamp on the brand, and I think that is what is missing. Also, part of it though is also the dream that is like built around these bags, right? Gucci has to have that like halo of like desirability, and we saw that during the Tom Ford era, during the Alessandro era, and that's how you get people into the stores, right? They did talk about how there was a decline in footfall, which led to weaker volumes. They also mentioned in the reports how they've had different campaigns, like the holiday campaigns, Valentine's campaigns. They have unveiled a new storefront merchandising, which has these bookshelves, kind of like a library or like more like an archive. They use these archival boxes, so it's like you're going into like the history of the brand. That to me is like the key takeaway. Gucci really went into the heritage these past 18 months, but I think the question is, are these products, are the advertising campaigns, is this what is bringing the customers into the stores? What was also interesting to me was what products sold the most. Now, of course, Gucci's leather goods is at 50%. Then there's things like shoes and ready-to-wear, etc. But 50% of what the brand sells are their leather goods, be that like the handbags, the belts, other leather accessories, right? I thought it was very interesting in comparison when looking at Kering overall. We had YSL and Bottega. YSL, their leather goods was actually much higher at 70%, and at Bottega it was 79%. We are seeing Bottega and YSL of their like offering, they're selling the most handbags and leather goods. But what's interesting to me is Gucci, their ready-to-wear is actually higher than all of these brands at 17%. At YSL it's 12% that comes from ready-to-wear and 9% of Bottega's revenue comes from their ready-to-wear. I haven't really been following Gucci ready-to-wear, but it would be interesting to look into what people are buying when it comes to the ready-to-wear. Another point that they stated during the earnings call is while they did over the past 18 months work to quote elevate the brand and bring that heritage side, they actually stated how they actually want to go back to the fashion side and boost up the desirability of the brand, as they said. Now they did, of course, they are going to be appointing a new artistic director with the departure of Sabato. The name is not known. They were asked about timelines, and Francesca Bellatini did state that it would be announced sooner rather than later. I don't think they are in a position like Chanel to really draw this out. Unlike Chanel, which is a private company, they have to respond to shareholders. This report from WWD, investor analysts are actually weighing in on this. They think that Gucci should be naming a designer soon. They want to see results soon, and they are suggesting that Gucci names a high-profile designer. According to Luca Soca of Bernstein, Gucci, quote, needs a new heavyweight creative director, and it needs it now. The task is to add an original and compelling fashion twist to the cleansed Gucci image Sabato De Sarno has contributed to create. More elegant, more qualitative, but dull. A heavyweight designer, say Eddie Slimane, the most likely candidate in our view, or John Galliano or Maria Grazia Curie, for example, could restart the buzz around the brand and help it to regain center stage. Throughout the article, this is a sentiment shared by many. Those are designers that will bring a buzz, a certain excitement, also a new customer base. I think most of all, I think Gucci needs a strong creative vision. When I look at some of these various ad campaigns, they're just all over the place. It's very confusing to follow this brand when there is no cohesive storyline. According to Soka, he does expect Gucci to reveal its successor around the fall 2025 show, which will be shown February 25th. The investors also talk about the delay in the quote recovery. From HSBC analysts, quote, seeing is believing, and pending group sales turning positive not before the third quarter in our view. The appointment of a new designer at Gucci, we are happy with our hold rating. They also state, we believe many investors are sticking to the side of caution and want to see numbers turning positive, as recovery at Gucci has been delayed many times. In accordance with Soka, HSBC believes that, quote, one element that could create some traction for the shares is the appointment of a new, well-known, and appreciated by the luxury market creative director to succeed Sabato De Sarno. And investors are expressing how they want to see this change soon. James Grisnick, I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that name, at Jefferies said, quote, seeing is believing. After Kering's management, this would, quote, set forward a confident outlook for Gucci based on the fundamentals De Sarno put in place for the brand. Jefferies believes this is something that a new designer, Slimane Galliano, would be able to build upon in a more fashion-forward manner, even if an imminent appointment would not present a collection until September at the earliest. So I'm not sure about this expectation of this kind of timeline unless Gucci has something else behind the scenes that they're planning, because if they want a collection by September at the earliest, some of these names that are being mentioned, Galliano and Eddie left their houses in October, so I don't know if the 1 year non-compete still applies. Would it still apply to them unless they're able to buy out the non-compete? Of course, there's that. Maria Grazia Curie, from what we know, she's still at Dior and she still has upcoming collections at Dior, so there's that. But who knows, maybe the collections are already complete and she could start working on the collection now and they're able to buy out the non-compete. Of course, there are things behind the scenes that can happen. Kering overall is feeling the pressure. One thing that they are able to benefit from with this whole Chanel creative director race and the ripple effect that this has had on the industry, on various brands, and just overall this shakeup within the fashion industry, there really is no lack of creative directors to choose from, be it Galliano, Maria Grazia Curie, Eddie Slimane. There's also Kim Jones. Some are also saying Jonathan Anderson as a possibility. With the Chanel race, many designers were willing to jump ship from their previous roles to Chanel, but Gucci could also be as enticing. It's a very high profile brand, and while it's not Chanel, Chanel is the second largest luxury brand after Louis Vuitton, then there's Hermes, and then it's Gucci or Dior. Maybe Dior is fourth and Gucci is fifth. I'm not quite sure because Dior doesn't release their numbers individually, but there is really no shortage of high profile established designers that have proven track records, and I also think have proven that they can both create great handbags but also create the dream around the handbags. One thing I will say though is I don't think minimalism is really a style that needs to happen at Gucci. I don't think any designer that does the quiet luxury thing, that does the minimal thing, I don't think there needs to be a minimalist at Gucci. Gucci is not a minimalist brand. It is not this direction of quiet luxury. It's a brand that is about being loud. It is a brand that is about logos. It is a brand that is about playing with logos, I think. I think the Gucci customer wants the branding, and I think we are gonna swing back into logo mania eventually. Anyways, guys, that's my video for today. Thank you so much for joining me in another one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!